Shanti, everyone. Shanti, Sister Denise.
Shanti, thank you.
Let's welcome all to the second session of our EGY this weekend, entitled You Are the Message. So yesterday, Sister Denise, you gave emphasis on how sense perceptions actually a major force that without being conscious about it, we get pulled away from Baba's remembrance. But you also said that though we are interacting through our sense perceptions, it is important to superimpose the awareness of remembrance of Baba so that this can help neutralize the influence of sense perceptions. And then we can draw power from Baba into us. And gradually we become free, which is really the aim of Raj Yoga. There were a lot of comments and also a lot of questions that came, some even after the session. And all those questions were sent to Sister Denise, and it will be taken up later during our question and answer session. But Sister Denise, let me read a few of the comments from Facebook. This is regarding the session as well as the Murli notes. One said that, unlimited gratitude, Sister Denise. Always, I haven't understood how remembrance can absolve or burn sins or how it can remove sorrow. But in few simple words, you made it so clear for me. Another one, meditation means to keep God with you in your mind, and thus you will remain free from the influence of sense perceptions. A very clear definition of meditation. Then there's another one, the Murli revision of, or the Murli notes of Sister Denise, I found has always been very clear for me, but particularly this line that I find very significant to hasten my progress in attaining my doctorate degree is have only God and what He has made new in your mind. And this is renunciation. As I said yesterday, really the clarity that you help us to come into this kind of realization is helping a lot in our progress and journey. So, Sister Denise, this session you will talk on the balance, how being in this world and with so many forces that we have to work with, being in the confluence age and yet managing the forces of iron age and moving towards golden age, how do we find balance?
It's actually quite an interesting point that you raised concerning why this takes so much time. And, you know, if you think about a soul and what is actually going on in this study and practice of Raj Yoga, first of all, we have to really think about the fact that this is something that takes an entire lifetime. And anyway, life is called a journey. Each life is a journey, but this life is a very special journey because we are accompanied on our journey by God, who is taking us from the effect of time all the way through the golden, silver, copper, and iron age, which has depleted the soul and maybe you can say the soul has gone from a consciousness point of view quite out of focus. And so he's bringing us into focus, into clarity, you can say. And also, you know, it's such a long process to go from the stage that we started in until the stage that he is bringing us to. You know, it's like undoing the effect of 5,000 years. So that has to be done slowly. And we, as human beings, we're trained to look at the effect of time in physical terms, but God is spiritual, and we are anyway spirits or souls. And so he's talking to us about the effect of time on our actual soul or spirit. And it's very, very difficult for a human being to grasp that and to perceive that, because it just doesn't come into the culture or the education process or anything like that. So he has to do, maybe you can say, a lot more work than meets the eye or than you could really realize. For example, it is a fact that the knowledge of the soul being a point of light came only in around 1963. And that was, 30 years after Baba started talking. And so you can see from that example that he took this much time to bring his students from a much more gross consciousness that is there in Hindu Bhakti to this very subtle consciousness of a non-physical concept, which is a real thing, and not a thing, but a being. You know, this is very, very subtle. And then when the Gyan came to the Western world, which was 10 years later than that, it came into a gathering of people who didn't have Hindu Bhakti as a background and who were much more able to manage very subtle concepts because of the nature of our education, our culture, but also what he talks about is the intellect itself. And, the intellect is not something you can see or touch or feel. And so many people don't really know what it is. And it's not really a thing, it's a capability. And he says that your capability or your capability for conceptualizing ideas so that you can understand them could be tamo pradhan or tamo or rajo or sato pradhan. So his process of teaching us is shifting our capacity for comprehension. And I think once or twice he said that the people from the Western world have a rajasic intellect in comparison with the people from Hindu Bhakti who have a tamasic intellect. So the difference between a tamasic intellect and a rajasic intellect is the rajasic intellect can comprehend a concept which is non-physical, whereas the tamasic intellect really can only manage physical things. And this is why Hindu Bhakti is so full of physical representations and rituals and so on. And the people from the West find that quite too much gross, too much physical. So we just have to factor that in. And so one of the kinds of balance that I wanted to point up is the matter of the packaging of bhakti. So Baba gives the gyan within the packaging of bhakti because, you really cannot speak to a person about an idea if it's out of context. And so the context is Hindu Bhakti of the particular type of the community where Brahma Baba was born, and the Gyan started there. And it's quite interesting to bear in mind that when Chi Baba started talking, he was talking to Brahma Baba, who was, from a Lokik point of view, born into the Brahmin caste. So definitely those of the Brahmin caste are considered the ones who are responsible for religion, religious practices, and so on. It's also considered the highest caste. And the form of Hinduism that Brahma Baba was born into as Lekharaj Kripalani, a regular person, was in an area which was geographically on the cusp of the Hindu and Muslim communities, and also a very strong influence of the Sikh religion. So that the references that you find, especially in the Sakar Murlis, take into consideration that people who were listening to Baba came from that background, that cultural and religious background. And so the references are taking the form of bridges to bridge the people from that background to Gyan. And Gyan, pure spiritual knowledge as comes from Shiv Baba, is best represented in the Bhagavad Gita. And so the people of that community had two scriptures that they worked with. One was the Bhagavad Gita, and the other one was the scripture of the Sikh religion, which is the Guru Granth Sahib, and then there's another one called the Sukhmani and the Jap Sahib. So these scriptures also were, especially the Sikh scriptures, were a little bit close to the Quran also. And they would be very aware of what was contained in the Quran because there was a large Muslim minority around them. And then after 1950, after partition, after the big war, that civil war that happened, then the BKs moved to Rajasthan in the mountains, and the people around had no real relationship with the BKs because they were tribal people and they were following their own very traditional form of Hinduism, which is very similar to other tribal practices in different parts of the world where they are minorities, like the people from the Maoris from New Zealand, the Aboriginals from Australia, the tribal people from different Pacific islands and Indonesian islands and so on. So they had no interaction. And they mostly interacted with other people who had come from Pakistan, who were Hindus and family members. And then gradually they entered into other parts or other Hindus from other regions. And Hinduism varies enormously from place to place. But the one thing that ties everyone together is the Bhagavad Gita. And Baba says, I am giving you the knowledge of the Gita, the real knowledge of the Gita once again. And a lot of the information that comes in the Murlis is correction of what's in the Gita. And why this is needed and I did some research about this, is that the Gita changed over time a great deal. And there are many different versions of the Gita that are out there, which are similar but not the same, and where there are many variations in terms of the concepts that are defined there. But the thing that Baba talks about, like, for example, Krishna is not the speaker of the Gita, it is Shiva. And if people knew that it was Shiva, then all the religions would accept it. But they don't, so they can't. But when you look at the Murlis and you look at the Gita, you will see that there are large numbers of quotations from the Gita in the Murlis. And the corrections that Baba makes are alterations to the Gita that were made through the sannyas religion. And if you look at the picture of the tree, in your mind, you must have it there with you, you will see that the sannyas religion is one of the branches, and what he calls the Hindu practices are the trunk. And if you look at the picture of the ladder, you will see that it's more given in detail how the Hindu practices degenerated over the time of the Copper Age and the Iron Age. And, most Hindus are not able to distinguish between the original Hinduism and how it degenerated, and what happened to Hinduism through the influence of the Shankaracharyas. So it all becomes one thing. And so Shiv Baba has to really work hard to disentangle that, because, of course, most of the people who are the souls of the Golden and Silver Age have taken birth in India throughout the course of the cycle. And we, who came into Gyan in the Western world in different countries, were born in maybe a Judeo-Christian culture, some in other religious environments, and there are also quite a lot who came into Gyan who had an Islamic background. And then there are others who just grew up in the Judeo-Christian environment without necessarily being particularly religious. And so you get another thing which requires balancing, just to be aware that the community of BKs, which is pretty large, we don't know exactly how many, but give or take 1 million people. And some of them, I think probably the overwhelming majority of them, tend to be religious-minded. And then there are others, maybe a minority, who approach this more from the angle of, you can say, philosophy. They're looking at the concepts and they want to understand truth, and they want to understand God and the soul and so on, but not from a religious angle. So we need to just be aware that these two phenomena are there, and we need to be balanced because we're in that context, you see. So there are many contexts that we find ourselves in that are that require balance. And then you see each and every one of us has the context of our family of origin. So we have to balance our sense of self as a Brahmin, Brahmakumar, Brahmakumari, which is our alokik sense of self, with the lokik sense of identity that we grew up with and that we took on. There's also a balance. And we also are in a context of work. Most of us are working, and so there is a work environment. And even if, because of COVID, you're working from home, there's still a work environment which has its own culture, which is not at all the same as what we might want to call Brahmin culture. So you have to balance these different cultures that you're in. And the world that we live in today is quite mixed in terms of culture. You know, most of my Brahmin life was in United States. Now I'm in Europe, but United States is considered as like a melting pot, and there's people of all different cultures all together, and they are supposed to become Americans from whatever they were when they arrived in America, because it's really a country of immigrants. So I was very used to interacting with people of all different racial, religious, cultural, economic, social backgrounds. And I'm very comfortable with that, but not everybody is in such a broad, diversified environment, but there's still balancing that we have to do in that. And when you are interacting with people of different cultures, you just need to be very aware of what the cultural differences are, so that you don't get into trouble through misunderstanding, because different cultures have different value systems. And if you assume that your value system is universal, you would be out of balance. And so you need to bear in mind that, you know, there are many sets of values which are equally valid. And there isn't really a set of values that's better than any other set of values. And this is why we make a difference, and we have to have a balance between our values and spiritual virtues, because virtues and values are not the same thing. So this is another area where we have to be in balance. And these are subtle kinds of balance and require subtle intuitive sense of what the different sets of values are that we are surrounded with, because it's very easy for there to be a clash of values. When we study spirituality and we give importance to virtues, that's quite an important matter, because when you make a distinction between virtues and values, you find that while there can easily be a clash of values, there isn't generally a clash of virtues. And so therefore in Gyan, we do give a lot of importance to cultivating virtues, because then our ability to interact with many different kinds of people based on virtues is much more harmonious than if we just stick to values, because inherently in virtues comes harmonious relationships. And this is one of the things that Baba is teaching us. So this is another area of balance that we need to just be conscious of or sensitive to. And the other thing which is kind of interesting to me is that values are developed in body consciousness, and virtues are developed in soul consciousness. And this is not much mentioned, but when I look at these things, when I research these things, I find that you can make that separation, because virtues come from the soul and values come from your your human cultural experience in the context of ideas based on the fundamental principle that people are bodies, and therefore values are based in body consciousness. But virtues, as we say, the original qualities of the soul, are purity, peace, power, love, bliss, and this cuts across all the different cultures, because the soul is not limited by race or culture or language or religion or anything like that. But values are all based in race, color, culture, etc., etc. And people mix up virtues and values and qualities and everything and make a big smoothie out of it. And it results in confusion, disharmony, and clashes. And because of this reason, Baba has sort of extracted for our attention these words of purity, peace, power, love, bliss, and said, these are your essential characteristics as a soul, and you need to operate on that basis, because then you're going to be able to function much more smoothly in any cultural environment that you go into. And so this is actually very intelligent. But we also have to grasp this. And going back to my point about why this takes so much time, why it's taken us so many years, is that as we progress through our lives and we grow from young people to old people, we are continuously evolving. And I think when we study Gyan, it actually encourages us to continue to evolve continuously and not just reach a certain point and just sit there and stagnate at that level. Of course, not everybody will actually continue to evolve, but Gyan does really encourage us to continue to evolve. And one of the things I learned from Dadi Janki in particular is, and Dadi Prakash Mani also, they always used to say this, you are students all the way throughout your life, all the way to your death. Always you are open to learning, open to new experiences, open to reinvent yourself every time circumstances change or you get an insight into yourself or spirituality. But you, as a person who is constantly learning, you keep yourself able to be constantly evolving. And that's a really important thing to bear in mind. And while we do appreciate the effect of age on the body, on the brain, on our speed, and all of these things, notwithstanding that, we still remain perpetual students, and every day we continue to meditate, we continue to study, and we continue to keep ourselves fresh. And every time we read a Murli, we experience it differently each time we read it. With the Murli notes, you mentioned the Murli notes, so I just make a little comment about the Murli notes, that what I'm doing with them at the moment is just going straight from the Hindi, the original wording. I'm not talking about how it should or shouldn't be translated, but I'm making the Murli notes in such a way as to pull the Gyan from the packaging of Bhakti so that we just have pure Gyan. And I'll be doing that for the next little while just to see how it goes. because there are just so many ways of looking at the Murli. But one of the questions that was asked is about what I have called the packaging, which you can also call the context. So Shiv Baba gives his knowledge in the context of Hindu Bhakti, of the type where Brahma Baba was born. And now many people are saying, okay, but I want the, the pure Gyan, and that is very valid. So the question of extracting that, well, of course, each one of us are in our own context. And so even we extract it, we still extract the pure Gyan, and we experience it, we think of it in the context of our own culture and values and so on. But so this is what I'm doing with the Murli notes at the moment, because it's another balancing act for us to deal with the essential knowledge which comes from Shiv Baba and the packaging. We have to deal with it because this is how it comes. And some were asking, why is it like that? And that is because it's incomprehensible unless there is a context. Now, if you take the context of your study of Gyan as the actual scripture of the Gita, that's another way to approach it. And if you want to do that, which is something that I do, then you would look especially at the second chapter of the Gita, which is really the essential knowledge of the Gita is in that. And in that, it talks about the impact of sense perception. And there was a big question of sense perception that has been coming up. And this is also a very important area of balance. Balancing our experience of reality with or without sense perception. Now, the soul is absolutely connected to the body, and the body is a very highly developed instrument for perceiving the material world through the five senses. And so the material world and everything that goes on, which also he calls the drama. What is the drama? It's this big cycle of a story which goes on in the material world and which is experienced by the actors who are souls embodied in these instruments for sense perception. And everything that is sensed through the body goes into the mind, and from there into the soul. And so the soul is influenced by sense perception. And the study of Gyan is a study of being able to limit or remove altogether the influence of sense perception. And it's a long, long process to bring oneself to a point where the soul is not influenced by sense perception. Sense perception means what you see, what you hear, what you touch, what you taste, what you smell. And everything that we experience from the moment we wake up in the morning till the moment we go to sleep at night is a constant sensory input. And we get very influenced by this sensory input. And there's one thing that I also was looking at, and that is how people manipulate each other on the basis of sensory input. You know, if you want to bring somebody under your influence, you will do this by reward and punishment. This is a very, common practice, that you make a person the way you want them to be by administering reward and punishment. This is called raising children. And then they will go for something that they get rewarded for, and they will avoid something that they will get punished for, because people think that the pleasure-pain principle is the thing, and so everything is operated like that, and that becomes the basis of religion, the basis of education, the basis of how children are raised, how people operate in the work environment, and how they operate their relationships. Is all basically the pleasure-pain principle. And then Gyan says, what you have to do is become independent from the pairs of opposites. So pleasure and pain is one of the pairs of opposites. And in the Gita, it talks about further pairs of opposites, heat and cold. You are affected by the weather. It's hot, it's cold, it's wet, it's dry, it's sunny, it's miserable, whatever. This will affect your mood. And another is fame and defamation. This is how you are in the society. So the society wants you to be compliant. And we have our family, that's one kind of society. We have our work environment, that's another society. The community in which we live in, the country, the religion, the culture. And in BK, we also have the environment of the BK world, which also applies the same thing in order to bring people into that compliance. And so some people are comfortable with complying with the culture because they agree with it, or they're ready to adjust to it. And other people don't like it and they don't agree with it, and then they have an antagonistic relationship with it, and they live in that way. And of course, that's more uncomfortable. So, but this is a reality, and the way that we are acted upon by these external influences is based on adjusting us, controlling us in a way through the pleasure-pain principle. And Baba says, if you want to be free, then you have to be equanimous. Your feelings about the pairs of opposites have to be equal. So in a social context, you will encounter defamation, and you don't like that, so you don't want to do anything which would provoke somebody defaming you, and so you will comply with what they want so that they don't defame you. And people are pretty empty inside, spiritually depleted. And spiritual depletion is indicated by the desire for fame, recognition, appreciation, acknowledgement. You want to be included, you don't want to be excluded, all of these things. And so the social environment will manipulate you, knowing that you are spiritually depleted, and if they want you to be a certain way, they will apply either of these things, fame and defamation, to get you to be a certain way. And you may or may not be aware of it. You may or may not like that. So this is an individual effort. But what Baba says is all of these influences, fame and defamation, are based in values, which are based in body consciousness, and these bring you into a situation where your karma is based on those values, which will put you into karmic bondage. And your relationship with God is based on this idea that he reminds us of many times. You called me to free you. You want to be free. You want to be liberated. And what I do is I give you mukti and jivan mukti. Mukti means I take you back to the soul world. And jivan mukti means I make it possible for you to live in a state of freedom in the context of the social world, all the different kinds of social worlds. And this is done by our absorption of gyan and yoga. So gyan includes knowledge about karma philosophy. And bhakti includes knowledge about karma philosophy that's inaccurate. So there has to be a lot of corrections done to the actual philosophy of karma. And so you may be living in a context where your society and community will attempt to force upon you incorrect concepts of karma philosophy, and you have to operate according to the correct concepts of karma philosophy and withstand the pressure to not do that. So you have to be quite competent to do that. So whenever you hear in the Murli the word worthy, I always translate it as competent, because the word worthy implies that you are under the influence of the social pressures of fame and defamation. And all they have to do is tell you you're unworthy and you feel bad about yourself, because unworthy means you are not good enough, and therefore you are a substandard human and you should feel bad about yourself. So in this way, the society manipulates people. And so you need to be able to notice what is manipulating you, how you're getting manipulated. And when Baba says, just listen to Baba, what he's also saying is, look, I will manipulate you in such a way that you become free, which is in your own best interest, because I am actually favorable towards you. And the community around you is, though it doesn't necessarily realize it, but in comparison with my influence, their influence is unfavorable for you, because it forces you into karmic bondage. And that means different kinds of suffering. Whereas Baba says, I will give you different influence, different information, and the consequences of that is that you become free, you come into your power, and you are able to create your fortune through pure karma, and you will be free from making the mistakes that happen when you come under the influence of a cultural influence that gets you to do karma that puts you in bondage. So we have to have the balance of really clearly understanding karma philosophy and keeping ourselves free from all of the things that bring us into karmic bondage, which are constantly exercising their influence on each of us in different ways. And in order to be strong enough to do that, you need the power of yoga. And so this is why we have to have gyan and we have to have yoga. And now gyan is, as I can see from the questions that were coming, people sometimes don't really understand gyan, or they understand it superficially, or they don't have enough information or something like this. So I thought that, well, I was fortunate enough to be taught by the daddies over a long period of time. So I think I have pretty good understanding of what the Gyan is, both from the study of the Murlis and from, you know, my time with these very high-level yogis who Baba has said, you know, these are the ancestor souls, these are the top-level BKs, and so they're important. Baba calls them the Ananya Souls. Ananya is a very lovely word which means the most cherished, the most loved. And it also says in the Gita, God loves the Jnani souls, because the Jnani souls, they understand the knowledge, and the knowledge is the gateway to yoga. So we also have to have the balance of knowledge and yoga, because, you know, it's quite easy and quite common to know the knowledge theoretically. You don't have to be really soul conscious to be able to process the knowledge, but you do have to be soul conscious to process the knowledge in such a way that it takes you into yoga. So that's two different ways of working with the knowledge. And it's very important to know that there are these four subjects that we have: Gyan, Yoga, Dharana, Service. And it's in that order. So the first one is Gyan, which means the knowledge. And the consequence of the knowledge is you will have yoga. And the consequence of yoga is that you will be able to function in a relatively hostile environment which tries to influence you in another way. And dharana means to actually function in the material world of sense perception with people around you who have a very different idea about what is what, a different value system, and they're body conscious. And you are able to function in your power, in soul consciousness, in a constantly hostile environment, which is always trying to take you away from your soul consciousness, always trying to take you away from this balance of the connection with God while in action, which is actually the meaning of karma yoga. The karma yoga does not mean sweeping the floor and doing physical service for the institution. That's not, should not be called karma yoga. That's better known as yagya seva, service of the yagya. It's a different thing. But karma yoga means that you perform every action, every thought, every word, every reaction to or response to whatever's going on while aware of your connection with God and while aware of what the knowledge says in that particular situation. And the situations change second by second. So I think it's just really important for us to think a lot about how do you be a karma yogi at that level? Because if we can be a karma yogi like that, that's really being the message. So it's important. Then the fourth subject, seva, service, is that the message is picked up by the people who don't have the message. And I think that our capacity to be karma yogis in the way that I just mentioned is really a very good way of communicating the message. And nowadays, in the world of fake news and all this manipulation through the media, social media, and so on, people really do not trust something that is told in words or images, because they're used to manipulation and being pulled into something that's not true through words and images. So I think what people will trust is what they feel, and they'll trust a vibration. And if you are a karma yogi, that sets off a radiance or a vibration, which is, I think I would say, a vibration of genuineness, a vibration of truth. And this, I think, will carry the message. And this is why I think Baba says, be the message. And if, people evaluate each other, and if you are really genuine, they will see it, they will feel it, and they will feel your aura, they will feel your the light that comes from you. They will feel whether you're real or not real. And people are getting quite conscious of needing to develop this ability to distinguish between who's real and who's not real, who's really favorable, who's really not favorable, in this context of all of this fake news and the circumstance in which this is really quite intense is about the COVID, about the vaccinations, this and that, because there's so many variations in interpretation of what's this pandemic all about. Is it biological warfare? Is it a mistake? Is it a designer virus, or is it a natural virus? Is a vaccination good for you or bad for you? Is everybody who's vaccinated going to die or not going to die, or the unvaccinated going to die? So the world is getting kind of divided into the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, and if you die of anything, it'll be put down to COVID, or in some cases, the COVID will be hidden to reduce the numbers, and then you get all this information which is, engaging your mind so that your mind is then not available for any other considerations, because there's other things going on in the world beside the COVID story. And definitely we are in a global situation of, I think, danger because of climate change affecting everything, shortages beginning, and political instability. So there's a lot of fear and insecurity and so on. And Baba has shown us, and we've experienced, that in this kind of context, the work that we have done on ourselves, the accumulation of jnana and yoga, has made us quite free from being manipulated by all of this stuff. So that's also a sign that we have achieved some balance. So I'm going to stop there, and we do have some questions left over from yesterday, and I'm sure that Sister Rose would have some points that she would like to raise, so let's see about that. But first of all, let's just take a few moments to go into silence and really think about, what does it feel like inside to be a karma yogi? So first of all, really make contact in soul consciousness with Baba. And in that connection, your thoughts, your words, your actions, they're happening in that context of Baba's remembrance. And we have to practice this because we have to be able to respond to stimulations that come to us through sense perception from people, places, and things. We have to respond as a karma yogi. So our karma is correct because we're connected. We're in our power because we're connected. We're able to discern people's motives for what they're doing because we're connected. So this practice of being connected and coming into action, this I think is a key balance, very subtle balance. We have to try to practice it, feel it. First of all, feel it, and practice holding this feeling of connectedness and come into action through the body. Om Shanti.